Hello, colleagues. Good afternoon, good morning. I'm Vijayalakshmi Vadivelu. I'm very pleased to invite you all into this webinar on green and just transitions. We are very pleased to having you here. Thank you for joining us. We have a very interesting presentation as well as the panel. The paper was prepared by Saltanat Raslova, Regional Evaluation Advisor at the Independent Evaluation Office. Saltanat is based in Istanbul. And we also have other colleagues joining from the country offices and from headquarters who will be sharing their own country experiences. So we have Evgen Groza staff from Moldova country office. We have Ruduska Kupac from Bosnia and Herzegovina country office. Also, we have some observations from Vesna Bisheva, as well as Sean Connell. There's a lot of interesting information that's going to come up. I'm sure some of you at least had a chance to look at the reflections paper, but if not, take a look. It has very interesting insights. With this, I would like to invite my colleague Saltanat Raslova to present the reflections paper.
Thank you very much, Vijaya. Thank you, everyone. Very nice to see you all. We are very delighted to share with you the IEO's new reflection paper on green and just transition. This was developed, it's a teamwork. It's developed with my colleagues Raiza Oblitas, who is a MEL specialist at Istanbul Regional Hub, as well as Natalia Melendez Fuentes, who is an IEO evaluation analyst. The topic of this reflection paper was identified as a regional priority for learning for RBEC, and we engaged with the IRH Green and Just Transition Regional Network. In the next slide, we will see our methodological and theoretical approach. Few things just to mention. We actually started this assignment in May with a workshop with the IRH network on this topic, who really help us to understand to enter the topic and understand the UNDP's work on green and just transition, identify some issues, challenges, lessons, and the aspirations of RBEC UNDP work in this area, which helped us develop different codes for our search. We started with more than 1,000 evaluations, which was then refined to 47. All these evaluations come from AIDA database, where we have more than 7,000 UNDP evaluations. But for the country office specific examples, we had to add 30 more evaluations, and it was a bit of a struggle to find the country examples. We didn't limit the evaluations in that for the examples. So some of them could be old, some of them could have specific elements that we thought would be a good example. So please bear in mind when you read our paper. All in all, we used AI-led search in AIDA tool, as well as human-led analysis, and we used Justice Lens to engage with the UNDP evaluation findings and conclusions. Our next slide, please. As a team, our aim was, or our task, because it's a reflections paper and the name speaks to itself, our task was to develop thought-provoking lessons learned from UNDP evaluations. And if you read UNDP documents, concept notes, different materials, even training documents on green and just, everything is said. Everything super clever, very complex, really interesting documents. But as a team, we actually wanted to move beyond of UNDP, and actually even go beyond of what works. because, of course, we all know that the transition is a very complex process, we wanted to even interrogate the system itself, whether the transition itself or the way we approach it is structured in a way that enables or even allows for some inequities for certain people. So the agenda for us, the transition and green transition work, is beyond the climate agenda or beyond the economic agenda. It was about the justice agenda. And we developed three elements of the transition as a system that come to play, which are power, history, and knowledge, which I said we move beyond or what is missing towards why those gaps exist, whose interests they serve, and how transitions can be structured to deliver justice. Few words, let me say, about how UNDP works on green and just transition in the next slide. Vesna and Sean, as we just said, will come back on this later on. But UNDP's work on the green and just transition is about linking climate action, economic transformation, and social inclusion. UNDP also supports governments in shaping policies, legal frameworks for climate resilience, biodiversity conservation, and just energy transition. UNDP also works on social protection systems to safeguard vulnerable groups, promote green jobs, skills development, and support MSMEs. The area of work of UNDP is also about accessing clean energy, fostering gender inequality, equality, and inclusive participation. Helps also UNDP, of course, also the main focus or main aim of the green and just transition for UNDP is help governments align development, climate, and equity goals for a sustainable and inclusive future. So while, as I said, the UNDP's work and vision of green and just transition is very complex, and the main concept of just transition is fairness, inclusion, and equity in the shift to a low carbon economy. But should we also think about not just who benefits or who benefits from it, but also who decides, who bears the cost, and whose time and knowledge sustain the transition? And taking the three elements of the transition, which is power, history, and knowledge, we've come up with 7 lessons. These lessons, we try that they speak to Arbeq region, but we also think they are very well transferable to other contexts and to other transitions as well. So the idea was here to shift the perspective of UNDP from managing inclusion within existing system to negotiating power, values, and accountability, where we have 7 lessons. The first lesson is on transition. Transitions are never value neutral, and I'll come back to that before, but let me just go quickly through the 7 lessons. The second lesson is about past harms shape present transitions. Transitions never come from nowhere. We are not starting from the playing field, and I think our colleague will talk to that more. Acknowledging material and emotional legacies through remediation, psychosocial support, recognition, and inclusive dialogue enables communities to engage with change instead of experiencing it as a repetition of all injustices. The third lesson is about power relations. Who benefits, who loses, who sets the agenda during the transition, who controls the timing of when to transit. The resources fundamentally shape transition outcomes. Political economy analysis exposes these asymmetries and helps design strategies that are inclusive rather than captured by the most powerful actors. The fourth lesson is about volatile context, and we will also hear from our country colleagues to talk about this. UNDP is big on risk-informed development, but it is necessary but not sufficient. In crisis-affected settings, just transition require expanding agency, ensuring meaningful participation, deep listening, protecting the vulnerable from accelerated burdens, and linking environmental goals with social cohesion and peace building. The fifth lesson is about gender work. Transitions become more just when they redistribute time and resources, formalize care roles, strengthen national care system, and most importantly, think about care society, where we recognize care as a principle of solidarity and interdependence, not only an economic activity. The sixth lesson is about skills, and I'll come back to that later. And the final lesson is about debt. High debt burdens, austerity conditions, and narrow fiscal space limit investment in resilience, social protection, and green jobs. Addressing financial modalities, the evaluations say, is essential to prevent transition costs from being shifted into the poorest communities and ecosystems. Now let me talk a bit more in depth with about two lessons. First, I'll talk about the values. The underlying values shape legitimacy, the lesson says. UNDP's work, values are quite important to UNDP. Our projects reflect commitment to human rights, gender equality, participation, social inclusion. As I said, these values expand access to services, support marginalized groups, formalize participation, and so on. And all our projects are grounded in national priorities. But we found that in our evaluations, these values often function as a background assumption, and they are not consciously negotiated in our projects. Evaluations describe inclusive processes, but seldom unpack how values tensions were debated or how trade-offs were resolved. Do we really talk about values of communities in transition? We all know that we experience transition differently. Do we embrace heterogeneity? Do we move enough or sufficiently from the single standardized narrative to honor the diversity, the experience and views and voices? And these are the questions that we've been asking ourselves when actually interrogating UNDP's findings. Community held values like dignity, land stewardship, security, reciprocity, collective memory, they shape whether transitions are accepted, trusted, or resisted. These lived values are often implicit and undocumented. Where UNDP created space for dialogue, acknowledged past harm, and aligned reforms with community priorities, their values, transitions gained social legitimacy and acceptance. But such practices are quite uneven. But for example, we have some examples in Montenegro. The Pljevla Just Transition Initiatives, it's supported by Slovakia, had a really novel approach to addressing sustainable transition in a complex socio-economic and environmental context. I think that's a next slide. One of the key innovations was the use of sense-making exercise, which was a participatory methodology that facilitated deep dialogues among diverse stakeholders, including citizens, private sector representatives, state institutions, and youth. This approach helped people to come together and understand and address the community's emotional and economic ties to the coal plant, because the coal plant was a part of the identity to that community, not just a source of income. In Panama, UNDP had established a reputation as a key player for the indigenous people. It was a trusted partner for them, and they had full confidence, the UNDP evaluation say. And this is due partly to its pivotal role in a series of dialogues and the development of the plan for integrated development of indigenous peoples, plan of Panama. This was developed through agreements with 12 indigenous territories. They were operational allies through specific action plans, and UNDP also put together some other very important mechanisms to ensure that indigenous people were part, and the actions, and before even the actions started, they were consulted. Here, it's quite clear that transitions gain legitimacy and balance when actors have structured spaces to articulate and navigate their values. I don't think it's about actually having the same values, but it's about having the space to talk about and embrace our differences. And the difference is not a risk, the difference is an invitation to connect to one another. The next lesson is about skills. UNDP's work on this area spans multiple countries and combines technical training, employability enhancement, and policy level engagement. The approach is multi-layered, ranging from grassroots skills development to national policy support. Evaluations show that transitions deliver stronger, fairer outcomes when skills needs are anticipated early and affected communities are directly involved in defining them. Inaccessible, unaffordable, or disconnected skill system risk reproducing inequalities, especially for rural, low-income, and informal workers. This lesson is quite interesting for me because it's not just about thinking that people are just the labor force. Of course, we are not talking about the employment skills, but also the social skills and enabling skills, and some of the UNDP's work actually speak to them. In Albania and North Macedonia, UNDP pioneered comprehensive, and that's the next slide, please, about some of the examples. In Albania and North Macedonia, UNDP pioneered comprehensive system-level active labor market programs that integrated skills development with support for self-employed, youth guarantee schemes, subsidized apprenticeships, and promotion of quality vocational education and training. In Arab states, UNDP projects provided vocational training tailored to market demands, resulting in job creation, increased incomes, and greater resilience for both host communities and refugees. In Uganda, UNDP partners with BRAC to design comprehensive skilling for youth, addressing both formal and informal market needs, and so on and so forth. Evaluation found that the strongest results were training was market aligned, linked to entrepreneurship, and supported by mentorship and networks. Integrated approach that combined vocational training, employability support, and enabling reforms proved more sustainable. However, we also found that UNDP's area work remains limited, and many youth employment programs still resemble short-term income generation projects with insufficient attention to labor market informality and access to social protection. That's it from me, but before I'd like to close my presentation with the question of whose transition is it and on what terms and whose terms and who is benefiting and excluded from this process. Transitions are deeply human processes. They're shaped by power, history, values, norms, fiscal constraints, and unequal access to voice. And UNDP comparative advantage lies not only in providing technical solutions, but also in helping societies negotiate these deeper forces, reduce asymmetries, and build transition that people believe in. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Saltanat, for sharing your reflections and for a very insightful presentation. And for those last questions, which is so important, whose transition it is and on whose terms it is. So I would like to now invite Evgen Groza to share insights from Moldova. Evgen, you have 5 minutes.
Alex, and thank you for inviting me. I wanted to bring an example of Moldova in transitioning from dependency on fossil fuel towards both supporting vulnerable populations, but also providing solutions on a longer term to bring a change into the energy sector. Next slide, please. Moldova historically was highly dependent dually on imported fossil fuel, namely mainly natural gas, and also the electricity which was generated from this imported natural gas. Here it's also one of the repercussions of the frozen conflict in non-governmental controlled region, which hosted the main generation capacity. So as a result of this dual dependency, when the Russian aggression against Ukraine started in 2022, Moldova suddenly lost both the supply of... Sorry, can you mute the microphone, please? So the colleagues were actually saying that if I Thank you. In 2022, there was a dual shock when Moldova both lost access to the natural gas as a source for heating, but also as a source for producing the electricity. So the Just Energy Transition Program of Moldova initially was more of an emergency solution to provide compensations to the majority of heating consumers in Moldova, and it was provided through the Energy Vulnerability Reduction Fund. Next slide, please. And here you would see the results so far. As you can see, the energy poverty in the country is still extremely high. So more than 88% of the people spend more than 10% of their income on the energy. However, this is partially mitigated by the support provided. And you can see that also, according to what we studied, the support with the energy bills also help to reduce the absolute and extreme poverty in the country. Next slide, please. So now, as the Vulnerability Reduction Fund enters into the fourth year of its operation, I would say that it's already an important part of the social support system in Moldova, and also it the importance of information about the vulnerable groups of population, how to support them. And I also wanted to quickly highlight a couple of examples how we work on longer term solutions with enhancing energy efficiency and providing solutions for communities. So next slide, please. One of the focal areas of our work recently was the medical institutions in Moldova, and UNDP conducted the energy audits to help hospitals to understand which are the most important energy solutions which can be done, and estimated the savings. So here, maybe just to quickly mention that the national currency is approximately 17 lei to $1. So you can see here that the renovation measures can help to reach quite substantial savings per one institution. Next slide, please. And in November, we completed three pilots to support hospitals outside of the capital area. So three hospitals received solar photovoltaic panels, and more importantly, also the energy storage capacity, so that they are not only reducing their costs, but also become more energy independent in the case of blackouts and shortages with the electricity. Next slide, please. And to quickly also tell you about the work on the community level, the renewable energy communities is a very new area of work in Moldova. The regulation on the national level is still being defined. So I'm very proud to say that we are now working with 4 energy communities. 2 of them are in the rural areas, so they are targeting at using solar power at covering their own costs, and also with 2 communities in urban areas. So here the multi-apartment building owners, they also reduce their energy costs by implementing renewable and energy efficiency measures. So once again, I think this would be a very good illustration of how the country is currently moving from the shock from extreme raising the prices for heat and electricity towards more sustainable solutions that we currently demonstrate, but also hope to streamline within the coming few years to be able to provide long-term solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Evgen, for sharing what and how it worked in Moldova. I'm sure colleagues want to know also the country level policy push that enables some of these changes. So we may have more discussion on this during the discussion. May I now ask Raduska Kupac to share insights from Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. Very good morning, good afternoon from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So this is a brief presentation of how we actually are managing past harm when it comes to just energy transition, which is very much affecting our presence and will, I'm afraid, affect our future for quite some time. Next slide, please. So where we are at the moment in Bosnia and Herzegovina, actually where we are for the past 30-40 years. Most of our electricity, I mean, more than 70% comes from fossil fuels. Also, when it comes to GHG inventory, energy actually is a source for 73% of greenhouse gas emission gases. It varies between 67-80% from the year to year. Very, very inefficient energy use. 20% of our GDP goes on energy, and it's important to mention that Bosnia and Herzegovina is still net exporter of the energy. So practically we have our energy sources, and yet inefficiency is at that very high level. Building sectors actually consumes 40% of the final energy. Over 80% of public sector buildings is connected to some type of fossil fuels, whether we are talking their own furnaces, whether we are talking about district heating, and residential sector, it's even higher. Extremely heavy fossil fuel subsidies, which means actually thermal power plants are extremely financially unfeasible, not sustainable, and yet there is a lot of money, state money, taxpayers' money going into their functioning. Energy price increase is expected. It's actually going on all the time. Energy price is still social categories here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and yet maybe part of the attitude of all of us actually is because of such low energy prices. We are pretty much trapped in poverty. We have low emissions, we have low GDP, and yet GHG emissions per unit of GDP produced is extremely high. You know, there is very conservative assessment which shows that it's 5 times higher than EU average, and also there are some assessments which actually show that it's 10 times higher than EU average. So that's where we still unfortunately are. Next slide, please. So actually, how has UNDP contributed and what we are doing right now? We have done a lot when it comes to policy work, when it comes to regulatory framework. We have established an energy management information system for practically all public buildings in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have supported the government to develop a national investment framework for energy efficiency. So actually, we know how to invest, where grant funds go, where private capital comes, where a loan is the best solution, etc. When we started back 10 years ago, maybe even a bit higher than 10 years ago, there was extremely low interest when it comes to energy efficiency measures, when it comes to renewable energy sources, because obviously there were different priorities. Right now, we have supported 685 buildings in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Whether we are talking about investment, technical documentation, development, etc., etc. And for example, when we started with our support, our grant was approximately 50%, and it was gradually reduced. So right now, when UNDP supports energy efficiency measures, it's certainly not more than 20 to 25% of donor funds. Also invested in public lighting system and actually methodology, how we work, how we approach it with historical assessments of the bills. We develop detailed energy audits. With very targeted measures, with the best results, we have achieved that a reduction of energy use and heatings is actually up to 53%, which is an excellent result. And actually those results keep interest of our partners, of our stakeholders for further investments. We have reached savings of approximately $7 million per year when it comes to national budget. So that means that they have approximately $7 million per year to invest into what they like, culture, education, etc., etc. Unfortunately, we still don't know how those funds are used. Energy savings is not accountancy categories, hence there is no sustainability. CO2 reduction, more than 35,000 tons annually, which is approximately almost 8,000 vehicles annually. More than 500,000 direct beneficiaries. So since we focused pretty much on educational sector, on the health sector, that's why we have such high number of beneficiaries, which was our goal in the first place. Creation of green jobs, of course, and recently, not quite recently, but some 4 or 5 years ago, we started working with SMEs and private sector. So we are whether doing investments on performance-based approach, whether we are supporting them with, for example, interest rate subsidies when they are taking loans, whether we are talking about measures, audits, etc. But the work with private sector is progressing quite well. What we have also done is when it comes to residential sector, we have done techno-economic analysis and financial mechanisms for a certain number of municipalities and cities in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But, geographically and when it comes to structure of the buildings, it can be very easily replicated to whole Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we pretty much know what are technical needs and financial needs for energy efficiency investments in our residential sector. We have also worked a lot in development of financial mechanisms such as energy service company, and that is, of course, the most difficult part when it comes to sustainability. Have we reached sustainability? Unfortunately, no. There is no sustainable financing. There is no financial mechanisms like some, ongoing functional revolving funds, green bonds very seldom, no public-private partnership. ESCO only when supported by UNDP or some other international organization by its own, it's very difficult to at least to have it at a larger number, sustainable number here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have no carbon finance established. We have no European trading scheme established, although we are obliged as a member of energy community. It's a highly political issue, so still no results in that. Carbon border adjustment mechanisms is actually coming 1st of January 2026 for actually all countries which are exporting to EU, and we still don't have any type of protective mechanisms for our exporters to the EU. Fossil fuel subsidies, unfortunately, still ongoing. There is decline in coal production because of the low quality of fuel, because of the low technologies, because of the inefficiency, because of commitments which Bosnia and Herzegovina has taken, like Western Balkan Green Agenda, etc. And we are at a very high threat of energy poverty. I already mentioned, for example, increasing energy prices. Just to mention that, for example, for households, for private residents, energy price is 41 euros per megawatt hour, and recommended price is 102 euros per megawatt hour, actually for electricity companies to be financially sustainable. So this is where we are. A lot of things has been done. Unfortunately, still a lot of things to go, and we actually hope that the country will embrace this transition better, because of its citizens, but also because of the obligations we have taken, because of global situation, and that we actually move forward faster in this sense. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Radiska, for those interesting insights from Bosnia and Herzegovina. May I now invite Vesna Bisheva. Vesna is the team leader for inclusive growth at Istanbul Regional Center. Vesna, over to you.
Thank you, Bia. I would like to complement the reflections made by Yevgen and Radushka with a more regional perspective, and to provide some additional examples and tools that we have developed in the Europe and Central Asia region, which might be of interest for the colleagues, but also this should demonstrate how we try to complement the national and country level actions with the regional support. Basically, the two case studies presented by Yevgen and Radushka very vividly describe the main challenges in the ECA region, and I will not go into details, but basically, in a nutshell, just to mention what Radushka said, that coal has been, in a way, a symbol of prosperity and pride for many local communities. And low electricity prices have historically cultivated inefficient energy practices. But as again it was mentioned, the traditional the breakdown of energy supply resources, but also the aspiration to EU accession and harmonization of standard and adoption of new pathways for development prompted most of the countries in the region to accelerate the decarbonization and adoption of just transition. So for us at the regional level, this was in a way an important motivation to zoom into the key challenges and to understand what are the key challenges that can basically create a risk that just transition is considered as another green agenda, which I don't think should be the case. Therefore, in early 2025, UNDP Istanbul Regional Hub developed the Just Transition Navigator, which basically is aimed to be a tool to help development practitioners to develop, to set the principles and tools that can help them to place people in the center of the just transition. But also more important, equally important is to help them in the programming so that instead of focusing on linear solutions, really to look at the complexity of just transition and help them to develop a portfolio approach. The second observation from the region is that very often we see a top-down approach to just transition, but our takeaways is that the just transition is far from one-size-fits-all approach. For a just transition to be successful, in a way, it has to be embedded in the local context, and this is also what Saltanat mentioned. But also, we should have a national framework, national vision, and commitments that will serve as a guiding, as a North Star for just transition. And here I come to the reflection also mentioned that the interplay between the top-down and bottom-up approach is important in order really to understand the overlapping and sometimes conflicting powers. Therefore, again, at Istanbul Regional Hub, together with the Oslo Governance Center, we have initiated preparation of a guidance on political economy analysis for just transition. So basically a tool that can help to really unpack the complexity and to understand the interplay and power play related to just transition. Also, two reflections to some of the examples also presented by Yevgen. Very often we refer to just transition as a complex process that requires a long-term commitment, but also a holistic approach in the implementation. But we know in practice that the real economy politics is not expecting that businesses, governments, and individuals are fully prepared for the transition. Therefore, there is an interesting example in Moldova that also we are supporting from the regional hub, is to pursue the portfolio approach to energy and just transition that will allow for more flexible mechanism for embracing the uncertainties associated with the just transition. And I think it's also interesting to mention that as part of this portfolio approach, we have supported the UNDP has supported national institutions to adopt so-called regulatory sandbox mechanism, which enables immediate responses with innovative policy solutions without losing the sight of the bigger picture. So I think let's say one of the main principles that we should consider in the future is really to keep this flexibility and ability to adapt in order to address the uncertainty. And in the interest of time, I will just also mention only two examples. Basically, one is coming from Georgia, where basically we use this portfolio and flexible approach to the process of just transition to ensure that the just transition process keeps momentum even when the government sometimes lose interest or are hesitant to take action. So in Georgia, we have developed the so-called Citizen Science Model Initiative that empowers young people to collect and interpret localized data by building digital skills, creating open access platforms, and generating bottom-up evidence to advocacy. So again, having this more comprehensive and portfolio approach is something that helps, I think, in order to pursue the just transition. And lastly, I will reflect on Saltana's point on the risk of green transition reinforcing pre-existing gender-based inequalities. And we consider that providing granular and sex disaggregated data is essential. And therefore, recently we have completed a joint study with OECD for ECA region. Basically, it's a multi-country study that really provides rich evidence about the disproportional impact of green and just transition across the green employment, skilling, and reskilling opportunities for women. And I think these evidences are important in order to empower women entrepreneurs, educators, women leaders, and decision makers in order to voice, let's say, for these inequalities. So just a last reflection is that basically the perspective that at regional level we are trying to pursue is to understand really the local complexities and that recognize that a just transition requires local actions, but basically the regional tools and principles that we are developing are here to support really colleagues at country level to unpack, to better understand the complexity of the transition, so that really they can develop solutions that are not imposed upon the people, but really they are developed in collaboration with people. Over from my side.
Thank you so much, Vesna, for those interesting insights. May I now invite Sean Connell. Sean is the Human Rights Specialist at Crisis Bureau. Sean, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vijay. And thank you so much, Sultanat, and congratulations. Um, I really encourage you all to get to read the report. It's not long and it's very timely. So just very briefly to explain that from our position at the global team and in the human rights and justice teams, that we've been responding to a number of requests, both at the regional level and at the country office level, for support in navigating just transition processes, especially putting the justice lens on it. I think that's such an important lens. And just to reiterate what everyone has said already, it's not an energy issue. It's not a livelihoods and jobs issue. It's not a human rights issue. It's all these things together happening at the same time. And just to give you evidence of that at the global level, there is a just energy or just transition coordination group, and that's made up of representation from teams in gender, finance, human rights, justice, governance, health, digitalization, nature, and climate. So it just shows you where we have specialization at the global level, we have these capacities. At the country office level, it's even more difficult, and at the government level. So it's very integrated, and this particular evaluation reflects the complexity and tries to simplify certain key elements for UNDP in it, and I think that's very, very important. Maybe just to speak to two important elements that Sultanat mentioned in the report, focused around the values and how the transition is navigated and who is transitioning. The first observation that we have is that the transition is in some respects being used or abused in certain country contexts, where it's been advocated that the transition doesn't have rules. It's a completely national process that happens outside of any rules, but we know that not to be the case. There are, of course, important international standards when it comes to labor, when it comes to human rights, when it comes to energy, when it comes to climate change. And these are, of course, should be key foundations upon which the just energy transition happens. And we've just finalized a report with the World Bank on the legal foundations for just energy transitions. I'll post it in the chat. And I think it's an important reminder that the energy transition will be one of the, in a lifetime, the biggest economic transition of our lifetime. And there are ripe for abuses, and we need to make sure it's navigated carefully and that there are rules and parameters on it. And of course, the international standards that are outlined in the report hopefully can guide that somehow. In addition to that, who is transitioning? And again, we don't want to complicate this. In every single country context, there are, of course, one, if not more, groups who are being disproportionately disadvantaged through a just energy transition process. So Sultanat has posed a very important point. Who is clearly not in the room? Who is clearly not being consulted on this? And when I say even consulted, let's be stronger. Who's actually not participating in this process? And I think UNDP has a very difficult position here in that it's usually and can be one of the first organizations governments are asking technical support for, but also we have a responsibility to make sure no one's left behind, make sure everyone's participating, and they can sometimes be in conflict. And UNDP, and you can find it online, it's well documented even in newspapers, has found itself in trouble through international media for not ensuring that certain people are participating in a just transition process, even though UNDP is the lead supporter of those processes. So I would just conclude with three simple points and to complement the excellent evaluation. Number one would be to recognize that just transitions happen with laws and policies, and we've worked very closely with a number of country offices who are really trying to strengthen regulations and connect international standards with what's happening at the national level for just transitions. They don't happen in a vacuum. There are standards and rules that need to form the foundation. The second would be to very concretely ask who is not in the room here. And, you know, just to give you a very important example, our country office in Bolivia have done an amazing job at making sure communities near mine sites or near mines where there is increased extraction of lithium for the just energy transition are participating actively in decisions around the just energy transition. The third and final point I'll make is no matter what we plan in a just energy transition, the strength of the plans, the policies, everything, things will absolutely go wrong. There are going to be adverse impacts. Workers will miss out. Communities will be unfairly displaced. Human rights will be violated. There will be massive injustices. Just energy transitions are too big to imagine they'll be perfect. So what are the grievance mechanisms? What are the justice processes to make sure that people who are adversely impacted can challenge decisions, can stop certain activities and can make sure that their rights are upheld. And I think maybe that's something to keep an eye out for. We don't see enough of that. There's often an assumption that the processes are going to run smoothly, and we absolutely know that to be not the case. So once again, congrats on the evaluation, and I'll maybe leave some time now for questions. Over.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks so much for those insights. Colleagues, I would like to now open the floor for any comments and observations. Please feel free to also share your country experience. I don't see any questions in the chat pertaining to today's discussion. So feel free to come and please do raise your hands and speak up. I don't see any hands. Okay, Ulrich, yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. It is a great pleasure for me to listen the lesson of your assessment. I just want to hear more about historical link between green and just transition according to the Sahel region. Have you, in your assessment or data collect, integrate the historical analysis about transition, about climate justice, and also? Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrich. Any other questions before we go to the panel on that? Okay, thank you. Who would like to come in on the Sahel question? Saltanat,
Probably I
shall we start
should.
with-
Yeah, quickly. No, I haven't found anything in the Sahel region. But AIDA is a very good database, so I think you can also do it yourself. There is plenty of evaluations, and I'm sure that region also part there. But I think you also, Kolikos asked about the historic research. I haven't done historic research, but I'm sure it will be a great tool because it will probably explain like why we are where we are. It look at the historical patterns, the root causes, and some of the interesting elements. Yeah, thank you. I hope I answered the question.
Sean, yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link in the chat. Thank you, Ulrich. I'm just going to put a link in the chat that last year UNDP also supported the publication of the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples Participants in the Conference on Indigenous Peoples and the Just Transition. It's not focused on the Sahel, but it makes a lot of very strong links to the role Indigenous peoples have played in various different transitions and how they've been adversely impacted, they've not participated effectively historically, and how those lessons should be learned in this current transition. So I'll leave the link in the chat for you to read the declaration and see what could be relevant for your region. Over.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Any other panelists who would like to come on the Sahel question? Ulrich, just to share with you, there was this discussion at the Jeff Evaluation Office conference. Overall, on the climate-related, when we talk about climate justice, it's also about the kind of priority climate justice is getting in the Sahel region. And one of the studies showed this is in not just Sahel, but generally conflict-affected fragile countries get a funding of $1 plus some cents per capita, while regular development countries are getting $167 per capita. So if you can look at the range of challenges Sahel has, the multiple vulnerabilities and challenges Sahel has, and absolutely no resources. Talking about green and just transition or climate justice or addressing climate change related issues becomes a huge challenge. I just wanted to leave that thought. But any other questions? I don't see any hand right, but I would like to ask the panelists on how do you think UNDP can address this issue, particularly in preparing for green jobs, because that's something probably most country office also would like to deal with. Maybe I can we can go around the panel for your quick thoughts on it. Sean, I have you on the screen, so shall we start with you? And how do we go about it in enabling green jobs and wading through the policy challenges?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think Vesna has a lot more to say on this than I do. But I mean, just very briefly, going back to our experience in Bolivia, for example, and we're seeing something similar in countries where there is large renewable energy projects happening and large extraction due to the just energy transition. We would start with focusing on communities most affected by the energy transition. And you know, what we've seen in the lithium triangle of Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia is that those communities are being prioritized, are being focused, are being supported, and they're participating more in the process. And that's probably where the green jobs necessarily should be beginning. And it's not necessarily turning them all into renewable energy jobs, but it's creating employment around these new economies that are developing in each country, including renewable energy, but including in the increased extraction. So, for example, these communities are actively monitoring environmental impacts in the community, and in many respects are being financially supported for that. So they're playing a new role. It's not a job in a fancy solar farm, but is it a very important job? And I think those communities most affected should be started to consult it. Over.
Thanks, Sean. Vesna?
Basically, Sean described, elaborated on the process very precisely. So what we consider is important is not only really to focus on skills as a kind of afterthought of the green transition, but what is important is really to consider and to anticipate and to work really on the foresight and focusing on understanding what are the, let's say, the impacts of the green transition, who are the most vulnerable, but also to understand, to better understand what is the new economy that is developing. So for us, what is important is really to focus not only on the local solutions, but also to understand what are the new sectors, the new opportunities that are created, so that the process really supports not only, I would say, the vulnerable groups, but also it's a process of restructuring or reimagining or transforming the local economy. So for us, skills development goes hand in hand with the policy work and support to reorganization or restructuring of the economies. Over. And I'm a strong believer in the granular granular evidence, really, that can better understand who is the most affected, who are the people that are most vulnerable, and not only people, but also localities that are most vulnerable. Over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vesna. Evgen, would you like to share your thoughts quickly?
Yes, thank you. I think in the case of Moldova, this is not a traditional case of phasing out coal or other fossil fuels, but rather we have a situation of sharpened, unexpected disruption to the supply of the fossil fuel. But maybe an element of the just energy transition program in Moldova, which I didn't mention in my presentation because of the time limits, is the digitalization and the digital transformation of the energy sector. And there, I think for building the new skills, what's important is building the skills of the energy workers and a better understanding how to use the data, which increasingly becomes available with the digital transformation. So as an example, this program works on installing 100,000 smart meters to measure the electricity consumption in households. And the next step, which is already being implemented now, is to help the distribution companies with establishing the data management software, and also to understand how to work with this data to better predict the loads in the electricity grids and better plan their expenses, so to optimize the work of the system. So I hope this answers the question.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, Evgen. Rudushka, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Our experience in Bosnia and Herzegovina also, we did focus on vulnerable groups like off-grid communities, underskilled workers, etc., etc. Our main focus was actually on drivers of change, on new economies, on educating new people, on capacity building. So whether it comes to energy auditors, whether we are talking about new technologies, developing solar panels, supporting that type of industry, green chemistry, circular economy, etc. So, I mean, we were more focused on kind of capacity building already existing economies, helping them to move step further into developing this green job market in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We do plan in the future, again, to focus on most vulnerable ones, like, coal-rich regions and associated businesses with that, which will be also a very important segment of that. But as I said, so far, it was like drivers of change into this transition and green economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rudushka. I don't see any hands up from the participants. This is your last chance if you have any questions. I would like to also share with you, because there was questions on our office, Independent Evaluation Office, did an evaluation of energy a couple of years back. Please do check out that report on discussion on Sahel or anything. We are also going to do about to commence an evaluation of UNDP's Africa mini grids program. I'm sure we'll be also covering this aspect in that evaluation. So Ulrich and colleagues, please do touch base if you have any particular issues you think would be of importance and focus. Please do reach out to Ben Murphy, I think, who is participating in this discussions. If there are no questions, Saltanat, any other last words from you before we close?
No, I just would like to thank all of the colleagues who helped us and supported us and gave guidance. And these people are IAO, our governance colleagues, and IRH, definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Saltanat, for a very interesting presentation that generated a lot of discussion. Thanks so much, Evgen and Rudushka, for your country examples, and Vesna and Sean for sharing your insights. I'm sure we all want to take this discussion forward. I would request all the participants to take a look at the paper. It has a lot of interesting examples there. Do reach out to Saltanat, Natalia, and colleagues who have further more insights than what actually went into the paper. And I think this is a very important topic. We should keep the conversation going on this. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.